Daniel thought his home was perfect. A safe neighborhood, friendly neighbors, and a backyard he had built with his own hands. But one letter from the HOA would soon turn his dream into a nightmare, and it all started with the one place he loved most, his backyard. Daniel's house wasn't the biggest on the block, but it was his. He worked long hours as an engineer, and when he came home, his backyard was where he recharged. The shed in the corner wasn't store-bought. He and his father built it years ago, back when his dad was still alive. Every nail was hammered with care, every plank measured twice. It wasn't just wood, it was memory. The oak tree at the fence line was just as special. When Daniel's nieces visited, they'd race around the trunk until they were too tired to move. The flower beds lining the fence were filled with marigolds and roses that Daniel himself tended. His neighbors often complimented him, saying his backyard looked like something from a magazine. It was more than a piece of land. It was his escape, his comfort, his pride. For years, he never once imagined anyone could challenge that, but fate had a different plan. Because soon, the very people who were supposed to protect the community, the HOA, would come knocking. And when Daniel opened that letter, he realized his peaceful backyard had just become the center of a battle he never saw coming. Daniel found a plain white envelope in his mailbox, the kind he usually ignored, until later. But when he tore it open, his world shifted. The HOA claimed a portion of his backyard. The very space where his shed stood wasn't his at all. They demanded that he remove the shed and restore the land for community use. At first, Daniel thought it was a mistake. He reread the letter, checked the dates, and even compared the language with older HOA notices. But there it was, in black and white. They were telling him that the backyard he loved, cared for, and paid for was suddenly not his. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, the paper trembling in his hands. He had the deed. He knew the boundaries. Yet this piece of paper was threatening to erase everything. Anger surged through him. This wasn't just about land. It felt like betrayal from the very group that was supposed to safeguard the community. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He replayed the memory of buying the home, standing with the surveyor as he pointed to the boundary lines. Everything, including the shed area, had been confirmed as his. And yet, years later, strangers on a board claimed otherwise. The injustice gnawed at him. He thought about the shed, the afternoons spent hammering nails with his father, the smell of freshly cut wood, the pride in finishing it together. He thought about his nieces chasing fireflies across the lawn, their laughter echoing under the oak tree. How could a group of neighbors in suits erase all of that with one letter? Daniel realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fight, and he wasn't ready to lose. The letters didn't stop. After the first notice came a second, harsher one, then a third. The language grew colder, the threats sharper. The HOA warned of daily fines if Daniel didn't comply. At neighborhood gatherings, Daniel noticed the change. People whispered. Some avoided his eye, afraid to take sides. Others quietly offered a word of encouragement, but their voices were drowned out by the board's authority. One afternoon, Daniel spotted a board member lingering by his fence, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes as if cataloging crimes. His sanctuary felt invaded. His backyard, once a place of peace, had become a battlefield. Daniel refused to cave. He dug through old files, pulling out every document tied to his home. The deed, the original survey maps, and even old notes from the purchase. He spread them across his dining table, highlighting boundaries, circling signatures. Every document told the same story. The backyard was his. But the deeper Daniel buried himself in paperwork, the more he realized the scale of his opponent. The HOA wasn't just a group of neighbors. They had lawyers, influence, and endless resources. Yet Daniel felt a spark inside him. He wasn't fighting just for grass and soil. He was fighting for fairness, for principle, for the truth. And that was something worth every ounce of strength he had. One evening, Daniel returned home and froze. A man stood in his backyard, camera in hand, snapping photos of his shed. "What are you doing?" Daniel demanded. "Just documenting violations," the board member replied coldly before walking away. Daniel's stomach churned. His private space, his safe place, had been violated. That night, he sat in silence, staring at his backyard through the window. It was no longer just a dispute, it was personal. The HOA wanted him to feel powerless, but instead, their intimidation gave him resolve. If they thought he would bend, they were wrong. Daniel reached out to Thomas, an old friend and retired land surveyor. Thomas walked the property with measuring tools, double-checking every line. After hours of careful work, he looked Daniel in the eye and said, "You're right, the deed matches. This land is yours." Relief washed over Daniel. Finally, proof beyond his own words. He presented the findings to the HOA, expecting them to back down. Instead, they dismissed it outright. "Our maps say differently," they claimed. Daniel's jaw clenched. They weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in control. And now, he knew he needed a new strategy. Weeks later, Daniel received a new letter, this time with a fine, thousands of dollars, charged against him for non-compliance. He sat in his backyard that night, staring at the shed under the glow of the porch light. For a brief moment, exhaustion tempted him to give in, to tear it down, pay the fine, and end the torment. But then, his father's voice echoed in his memory. The laughter they shared while building the shed, the pride in completing it together. To destroy it would be to destroy a piece of his father. Daniel exhaled slowly. No, he wouldn't surrender. If the HOA wanted a war, they would get one. Daniel hired an attorney, someone who listened, believed, and agreed to fight. Together, they built a case, gathering every deed, every map, every testimony. Nights turned into early mornings, as Daniel prepared documents and rehearsed arguments. When he finally stepped into the courthouse, nerves danced in his stomach. But beneath them was something stronger: determination. This wasn't just about a shed. It was about proving that truth still mattered. The HOA's lawyer spoke first, portraying Daniel as defiant, someone unwilling to follow community rules. They waved vague maps, insisting the shed stood on land that wasn't his. But when Daniel's attorney arose, the atmosphere shifted. Calmly, he laid out the deed, the surveys, and Thomas's expert testimony. Each piece fit together like a puzzle, undeniable and precise. Daniel watched the judge carefully. For the first time, he saw a spark of recognition. The truth was shining through the fog of lies. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered his decision. Daniel was declared the rightful owner of his backyard. The HOA had overstepped. Not only were they ordered to drop all claims, but they were also forced to reimburse Daniel's legal fees. Gasps echoed. The board members looked stunned, unable to hide their disbelief. Daniel closed his eyes, relief flooding him. After months of stress and sleepless nights, justice had spoken. That weekend, Daniel walked across his grasp with a new sense of peace. The oak tree swayed gently, the marigolds bloomed, and the shed, his shed, stood proudly. Neighbors congratulated him, some admitting they had silently hoped he'd win. Daniel smiled, sitting beneath the oak tree with quiet pride. His backyard was no longer just a place of rest. It was proof of resilience, of truth, of standing firm, even when the odds were stacked against him. The HOA had tried to steal his backyard. Instead, they gave him a victory that would never be forgotten.